Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Pyromancer here, and welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are on the world. And before I get started, I just want to give a huge thank you to all the support on the last few videos. The comments have just been overwhelmingly supportive. Just people speaking about how the videos, it's their favorite type of video, and how it's, you know, just really exciting and a great return to the old content style. But you guys have just been supporting so much, and I just wanted to say thank you. It really is like humbling and heartwarming, and just a great reminder of like why it is I do what I do. So thank you so much for that. With that being said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure that you leave a like. Make sure that you leave a comment letting me know what you think about this, because today I'm going to explain to you one of the most long-standing and important underlying concepts of WoW's lore that exists, period. Today's topic will be about fractals. Some of you may be familiar with this term. If you played Shadowlands patch 9.2, which I know very few people did, it is home to one of my favorite zones in the history of World of Warcraft, Zereth Mortis, and it heavily leans on the concept of fractals. Now, before we get too much into that directly, let's describe what a fractal actually is. In mathematics, a fractal is a curve or geometric figure, each part of which has the same statistical character as the whole, so it's a repeating pattern. Fractals are useful in modeling structures, such as eroded coastlines or snowflakes, in which similar patterns recur at progressively smaller scales, and in describing partly random or chaotic phenomena, such as crystal growth, fluid turbulence, and even galaxy formation. Fractals are infinitely complex, self-similar geometric patterns, where the same repeating structure appears at different scales. So you can see it image-wise in some of the things that I have pulled up here. There are things in terms of more geometric structures and more naturally occurring structures, Fibonacci sequences, things along those lines that fractals relate to. So effectively, if we were to simplify what a fractal is, it would be a repeating structure. So the way that this is portrayed in World of Warcraft most directly, most obviously through the Zereth Mortis questline, is through what some would call sacred geometry. So again, repeating patterns, 6-point hexagon patterns, 8-point octagon patterns. The most commonly recurring numbers in World of Warcraft, especially when we're looking at fractal-related stories and things, is 5s, 6s, and 7s. 6 cosmic forces, 7th for the one in the middle, that's undefined and really unknown. 5 for the old gods, 5 for the dragonflights, 5, at least to some point, with the world trees, 5 keys to open our way, 5 torches to light our path. There are 5 eternal ones. And if I'm being honest here, I'm pretty sure that the old gods just like speak in fractals. Like, that's why the old god whispers tend to apply to more than one situation, because they're not talking about just one situation. It's almost like they're describing the very fractals or repeating cycles themselves. It's pretty fascinating. There are intentionally repeating numbers in World of Warcraft, and again, Zereth Mortis focuses on this very concept. So if you go and you actually play through Zereth Mortis, and in fact, it's not even specific just to Zereth Mortis, you can see it on the WoW cosmology chart as well, there are recurring themes, as the mad scribe Farim had to say, the patterns, the fractals. It gets crazy, right? Farim is a broker, so formerly Koreshi, who spent a tremendous amount of time studying and trying to understand the nature of fractals in Zereth Mortis. Now, while I could easily make a video an hour long just about Zereth Mortis alone, I would, again, as I often do, implore everybody, whether you hated Shadowlands or not, to go and play through the patch 9.2 main story questline that leads up to the Sepulchre of the First Ones and the Zereth Mortis zone, where we confront the Jailer. It is tremendously important, but what many people don't know is that fractals have actually been a core part of WoW's design for a very long time. For those of you that have seen it, I actually had the privilege to interview the former lead narrative designer for World of Warcraft, Dave Kosak, And although the term fractal, according to him, was not something that he had heard before, he did confirm to me that World of Warcraft is, and has been for a long time, designed with kind of these fractals and patterns of classical storytelling in mind. And so does that happen, do you think, I'm trying to word this properly. I guess I'm thinking about this question from the perspective of kind of narrative fractals. And you're probably going to hear me say that word quite a lot, because I find that the more that I study WoW, the more that it appears that the game is perhaps built in this fractaline manner, where whether you're looking at the Titanic conflict, or what's right below it, and right below that Keepers, or whatever, down to the Horde and the Alliance, I feel that there are repeating cycles that this is happening. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, man, I'm going to steal that. What is fractal narrative? I like that, because, there's a big picture, and then as you zoom in, it's more complicated, but yet it's the same themes are echoing at each level.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely deliberate. I mean, that's certainly something. I mean, we probably didn't phrase it that way,
Sure.
but
I didn't see the word fractal until Shadowlands, to be fair.
Okay. Yeah. But again, it goes to that, like, what is the heart of the story that we're trying to tell? And then everybody kind of from the top down, from the big cinematics all the way down to an individual quest designer, plotting out a part of the zone, is like, oh, I'm going to use that theme as this, little moment. And that creates that kind of fractal pattern of.
Yeah. What that means is that there are stories that exist at the grander scale, think the Titans, and then there are repetitions of that story that kind of come down to the more worldly, smaller stories in Azeroth. And I'll give you some examples of fractals in a moment. But Dave Kosak isn't the only one, and Farim, and hence Steve Denuser, is also not the only one who has referenced this concept of fractals. In fact, as far back as 2015, when the first Chronicle Volume 1 came out, Chris Metzen wrote pretty overtly in the preface to Chronicle that World of Warcraft is cycles within cycles. One may say circles within circles as well. You hear that a lot in World of Warcraft, the circle nears completion, complete the circle. This is something that N'Zoth has said, Sargeras has said, Il'gynoth has said, Ner'zhul as the Lich King has said. The completion of the circle, the completion of the cycle. In my opinion, it refers to the completion of a pattern. And again, in Chronicle Volume 1's preface, Chris Metzen himself refers to it this way. But once you kind of have what I would call this perhaps revelatory moment where you realize that World of Warcraft is in fact built in patterns, you will never look at the game the same way again. I know that my last two video titles have been, this changed how I looked at World of Warcraft forever, this will change everything. But it really does. I mean, understanding the concept of fractals is incredibly important, because you basically start to look at World of Warcraft, and just so you know, this is not something that only applies to World of Warcraft, this goes far beyond that. You start to look at things in terms of patterns, right? And I will say that trying to identify patterns is a means by which we try to bring order and understanding to things, but I don't necessarily think that, it's a bad thing, or that it's necessarily inaccurate. When you start looking at WoW and fractals, you'll realize huge similarities between certain characters. And an obvious one, Illidan Stormrage and Sargeras. Not only do they visually look incredibly similar, they have some incredibly similar story beats, like the willingness to kind of betray the philosophies and views of their compatriots, their partners, in order to try to either pursue power or save their homeland. An example, for instance, it's said that Sargeras imprisoned a ton of demons when he was working for the Titan Pantheon, and many of them were imprisoned in the Plane of Banishment, a glowing verdant star known by the name of Mardum. And in this pocket dimension, which Sargeras is alleged to have crafted, the demons roiled in fell energy and rage for eons as he imprisoned them and brought them to justice. Now, eventually, Sargeras decided that he needed to burn the entire cosmos to ash in hopes that life would arise from those ashes again. And in order to do this, he needed a vast force of unquenchable rage, Thus, he sought out Mardoom. He tore the prison asunder, spilling its wrathful denizens into the cosmos. But the unraveling of this energy from Mardoom enveloped Sargeras and scarred his very form. His once noble form turned green with emerald fire bursting from his eyes. Fell volcanoes erupted across his once noble form. It doesn't actually describe Sargeras gaining wings, horns, or any demonic traits at all. That's not described in Chronicle whatsoever, but it's him kind of tearing open this, what I imagine to be this almost spherical pocket dimension or world in order to absorb its energy, and this transformed him. Now, if you know the story of Illidan Stormrage, that sounds pretty familiar, right? Illidan Stormrage ends up consuming this powerful demonic artifact, the Skull of Gul'dan. And when he does this, it transforms him into the demonic form that we see him as now. Of course, back during the War of the Ancients, Illidan did not look this way. So that is one of the more obvious, I think, fractals in the game, right? Illidan kind of being this anti-hero, Sargeras trying to be this kind of anti-hero. There are some pretty clear similarities, but it goes beyond that, because there are other characters who often have extremely similar elemental alignments and power alignments who would also fit into the fractals and story patterns with a character like Sargeras, and he's the character that I know probably the best, so I'll continue to use him as an example here. How about his story that he went to the Titan Pantheon after cleaving this world in two, because he was terrified by what the Dreadlords had revealed to him about the old gods and the machinations of the Void Lords. And the Titan Pantheon was like, yeah, no, we don't really agree with you. There's a different way that we could have solved that problem. And Sargeras felt very betrayed. He felt as though they would not listen to him. They were kind of set in their ways and they would never see reason. And as a result, Sargeras isolated himself from the Titan Pantheon. He went and raised a demonic army and decided that he was going to do things his way. Well, if you're familiar with the Keeper lore, Odin, the Prime Designate, who is certainly mind-bogglingly similar to Sargeras, did a very similar thing. Now, not only is Odin also a warrior, like Sargeras is alleged to be by Chronicle, but Odin does a very similar thing. When the Keepers are intent on empowering the dragons to create the dragon aspects, Odin does not believe that they are worthy of such a gift and that they shouldn't be doing this. He, as Prime Designate, is supposed to have, the final say, but he says this to them, proposes this to them, and they don't agree. They don't want to listen. So enraged, Odin decides to separate himself in the Halls of Valor from the rest of Ulduar. This is before it's fully turned into a prison for him by Helya at the behest of Loken, but he ends up isolating himself. And what does Odin do? He raises an army of angels. So you can kind of see a similarity in the same way there. Here's another one. Deathwing, Neltharion. He believed that the Primal Incarnates were an incredible threat to the well-being of the dragon aspects and the dragon lands, if that's what you want to call it, the Dragon Isles as a whole. So because he was afraid of being open and honest with Alexstrasza, for fear that she would shut him down and basically tell him that what he was doing was not okay, Neltharion isolated himself because his intention was to protect the dragons. And as a result, he creates this new race of humanoid draconic beings known as the Drakthir. So he raises his own private army. He ends up being corrupted by darkness in terms of corruption via the old gods, right? And turns down this dark path of madness. You might make a correlation to Odin, where he trades his eye for knowledge of the Shadowlands and does things that are inherently pretty fucking bad, like, if it's true, forcing Helya to become the first Valkyr against her will. Pretty fucked up to do that. And I feel that this kind of translates up with Sargeras becoming maddened by the knowledge gleaned from the Dreadlords about the will of the Void Lords. Now we can take it even another step. We can look at someone like Firak, again, who, driven by rage, very similar to the others. Odin definitely has some anger problems. Neltharion, I would say, is a little more calculated, but Deathwing's rage was certainly a thing as well, especially thanks to the corruption of N'Zoth. And Sargeras is most certainly driven by rage and fear and kind of paranoia. All of these characters similar in this way. Firak, kind of a similar situation, where again, a guy who is aligned with fire, just like the other three, is, sent down this path of being corrupted by darkness via the Shadow Flame, kind of turns against the will of the others around him, even if Iridikron kind of was witnessing it and knew what was happening. Never really was going to step in to stop it. And again, in a feeling of being abandoned. I mean, Farak even says this: my brother betrayed me, my sister abandoned me, but I don't need them. I don't need anybody, right? So it's this mentality that these characters have of isolation, righting perceived wrongs, raising, in a lot of cases, their own armies, being aligned with fire, having associations with rage. These are fractals. And this is just one line of fractals. Don't even get me started on the fractals of people who have been dominated. Sargeras, the Jailer, the Lich King, in terms of Arthas Menethil and Ner'zhul, Anduin Wrynn. The list goes down. You can literally see visual similarities between them. You can see story arc similarities between them. And when you start looking at World of Warcraft in this way, it is, like I said, almost revelatory, right? You look at the story of someone like Eonar and her actions, and someone like Alexstrasza or Ysera, and kind of making these correlations can help bring greater clarity to what's going on. But the beautiful thing about World of Warcraft is that it doesn't just stop with major characters. Even though I think about it, in my head, how I visualize this is there's one big-ass ring on the outside where you can maybe put like the cosmic forces. There's another ring inside that, and that's where the Titans go. There's another ring inside that, that's where the Keepers go. There's another ring inside that, that's where the Dragon aspects go. There's another ring inside that, that's where a lot of like the main big characters like Sylvanas, Tyrande, Malfurion, and Illidan, that's where they go. Hell, even throw another ring in there for the old gods, for some of the Loa or wild gods, like the elemental lords. And it goes down and down until we're at the smallest, most minute storytelling beats in World of Warcraft. But if you pay attention, they are the same. Hope, betrayal, sacrifice. Faces change, the tale does not. This is actually a quote of something that we found in Korthia, the Shadowlands, the ever-living statuette, which is actually referring to the nature of fractals. But again, I promise you, this is not something that was introduced only with Shadowlands, as again, Dave Kosak confirmed that this was intentional to me. And again, 10 years ago, Chris Metzen wrote a similar thing in Chronicle Volume 1. So this is not new. World of Warcraft is built in patterns. And it's from the very highest level of the cosmic conflict down to the very lowest. But the most beautiful fucking thing about it is this: by recognizing the patterns and analyzing them against one another, contrasting them, by taking characters that have correlations to one another or direct relations to one another. How about this one? Norgannon, Loken, Malygos. All three characters associated with the arcane, binding magics, imprisonment, and even betrayal. Oh, and madness. Let's not forget madness. That one's kind of important. Those are all three connected through the power of Norgannon and the titanic empowerment which occurred with the dragons. The betrayal at Ulduar probably gives hints about the nature of Norgannon, or Norgannon, however it's probably supposed to be pronounced Norgannon, to be honest with you. And that's not a bad or malevolent sounding name at all, surely. And then we get into like Malygos, where he was, driven mad by the sheer destruction wrought by Deathwing. And again, you can start to see correlation not only in their lineage, but in the actual stories that are being told about them. And what I think is so cool about this is that I think it's almost like a set of tumblers, of like locks. Tumblers isn't even the right way to look at it, of like a lock where you have different stories that relate to one another. And as you rotate the rings, so to speak, they align in certain ways. And why I think this is so cool, if I'm correct about this, is that I think that you can use clear, fractal, connected characters and their stories to make guesses and predictions about the related characters. So what I mean by that is, if you look at Loken's corruption by Yogg-Saron and his subsequent betrayal at Ulduar, the events of him killing Thorim's wife, attempting to deceive Thorim regarding it, using the frost giants and whatnot, I love this because that may actually be, to some degree, indicative or informative of the story of someone like Norgannon or Norgannon, who is again one of the Titans. I think that you can basically take the different fragments and align them to see the grander underlying pattern of these characters, of their archetypes, of their classical stories that are being told and retold. It's why I associate often anything with that blue glowing titanic magic to order, machines, domination, because there are clear similar visual motifs. And frankly, guys, I know that people hate the Shadowlands, but one of the reasons why Shadowlands is so damn important is because the whole thing is one big ass fractal. The whole thing, even Oribos itself, the core city of the Shadowlands, this pillar, literally, that connects via tether through the in-between to all the other realms, right? And these realms exist separately, kind of separated in their own little pockets or whatever they are. They're fragments of a greater whole, but they've been divided and they've been separated out into their own little realms. You can literally look at Azeroth as the center confluence of everything in the cosmos, and the Twisting Nether as the in-between transitory pathways to the other realms, and the greater cosmic realms as represented through what the Shadowlands is showing you with its structure. The whole fucking thing is a fractal. It's a huge pattern, which to me is just like, it's mind-blowing. Like, since I started looking at WoW in terms of fractals and patterns, I have never been able to unsee it. And so in this way, again, by looking at WoW like this, you can really start to recognize some incredible things. But I know that I've said a lot of words here today. I've said a lot of stuff that is sometimes perhaps hard to visualize. So I want to show you a game that I actually have on Steam to try to illustrate to you what exactly I mean here. Now, this game is called Space Flux. So let me show you this. This is what I mean by fractals to give you a visual representation. This map is infinite to the outside, and this map is infinite to the inside. And as you traverse inward, the pattern that the map is and adheres to repeats itself, right? Now, the thing with World of Warcraft is that there are often tiny variations, right? You might pick up this gun or pick up that food. And as you move through the pattern again, when you come back, it might be slightly different. But overall, the pattern stays the same, whether you move in or outward. Now, if you were to look at this from the stance of like the cosmic forces, this actually can be easily related to the appearance of the cosmic chart in World of Warcraft. Here you've got like your order, your life, your light, your chaos, whatever you want to call it. And you can see that no matter what you do, you cannot reach the center. And no matter what you do, there is no edge that you can make it to as well. Now, I'm trying not to move too much here because I know that this can give some people some motion sickness, so I do apologize. But I hope that this can illustrate to you the concept of fractals that I'm referring to. World of Warcraft is definitely built in this way. And when you begin looking at the world like this, you will never unsee it. So when you pop in on my stream, and I wanted to get this out of the way as well because you're going to hear me use this term a lot going into the future, you hear me use the word fractal, this is what I'm talking about. An ever-repeating pattern, but with sometimes slight variation so as to perhaps obfuscate to a small degree that there is a repeating cycle here. So start considering looking at World of Warcraft in this way. But I really wanted to talk about fractals in terms of why it's such an important concept. You can recognize different fractals when reading through WoW books. You can recognize them when playing through the game, whether it's quests on the Isle of Dorn, where there's like 7 warriors, and one of them, who looks quite similar to Sargeras, is intent on saving the others, whether it's similarities between major characters like Sargeras and Illidan, which do make them so potentially amenable to one another, whether it's repeating stories in minor storylines. I'm looking for it everywhere. And again, you have to be careful because confirmation bias and whatnot can lead you to look for patterns where they don't exist. So you have to really look for the evidence that there is a connection. One of the things that makes it easy in World of Warcraft a lot of the time is that you have characters that are directly descending from other characters, like, again, Norgannon, Loken, Malagos, so on and so forth. So, and there are also, I believe, hidden things in World of Warcraft, right? I make the Odin fractal comparison with Sargeras Not just because Odin is similar, but because I think there is a literal underlying connection between Odin and Sargeras that we don't really know about. You want to know a couple other insane Fractal storylines? How about you go play the Troll Heritage questline, and you learn the story about Kevo Yasiti and Lukao. It is strikingly similar to what is alleged to have happened between Sargeras and Argus, the Unmaker. I highly recommend you play it and consider looking at it through the lens of Kevo Yasiti is Sargeras, and Lukao is someone like Argus, or perhaps even Azeroth, a shattered soul that's been broken into a bunch of pieces by the ogres. And through this method of using fractals, you can even start thinking about World of Warcraft on the grandest scale and the smallest scale. So if you guys, and this is going to be one of my next videos, if you guys have done the Eco Dome quest for the Oasis in patch 11.2 Ghosts of Koresh, holy shit. There are some fractals there where the game is trying to introduce to you certain concepts, ideas, and themes so that you can take that and recognize that it has occurred on a much bigger scale as well. And if you've done those quests and you know about my theories about the sky of Azeroth, you probably know where I'm going with this. So it really allows, I think, a different level of prediction. If you understand the past, you have a better chance at understanding the future and predicting it by recognizing the patterns and seeing how they repeat and how in some cases they can be broken. You can kind of get an idea of what might be happening. And here's a little teaser one for you. Warriors and even paladins in World of Warcraft have a history of sacrifice. With paladins, you even have a spell called Blessing of Sacrifice. And some examples of warriors sacrificing themselves for the greater good. How about Broxagar jumping through the portal to face Sargeras? How about Grommash Hellscream sacrificing himself to defeat Manaroth in order to free the orcs from the blood curse? How about Varrock Saurfang sacrificing himself to Sylvanas Windrunner to avoid a gigantic conflict in which many, many people would die, and many already had died? How about Varian Rin jumping off of the ship in Legion to sacrifice himself to allow us to escape after being defeated by the Burning Legion at the Broken Shore? What could that potentially tell you, especially in relation to other characters whose main story tropes involve sacrifice and other warrior characters that exist in this game? See what I'm getting at there? What could be possible for other warrior characters at different levels of cosmic power, especially the high levels, to recognize their mistakes, their flaws in the case of Grommash, and sacrifice themselves? What could happen there, right? We also have Garrosh Hellscream, who didn't exactly sacrifice himself, but was so bent on rage and pride that he served as an eternal battery in the Shadowlands, and then literally raged so hard that he exploded. So there are other potential outcomes for warriors, but I just want you to keep that idea in mind. I would also throw out there that there are some pretty big fractal similarities between the Pantheon of Death, the Eternal Ones in the Shadowlands, and I believe the actual Titan Pantheon. So I urge you guys to familiarize yourself with these stories, with these characters, and stop looking at them just as individual characters that are not related to one another at all, because that's not the case. They absolutely are. In fact, I would wager that fractals, and there are numerous articles online, books written about this that would corroborate this belief, that fractals extend through all media. And it's very simple in terms of like, you hear a song or a bunch of songs or movies or read books, and those as an artist may inspire your works. There may inherently be, as much as you try to be original, there may inherently be that inspiration, that kind of repeating thing in your works. And that doesn't mean that you're ripping that stuff off. This is just the nature of inspiration. You see something, you think it sounds cool, you take it and integrate it into your own works, you try to put your own little spin on it, there you go. But there's still a connection. It is still inherently related. It's why it is absolutely worth comparing World of Warcraft characters and mythos to mythos and beliefs from things like ancient Egypt, like the Norse mythos, especially creation and destruction mythos and rebirth mythos like Ragnarok, right? Which is essentially what Renalash is, this battle of light versus darkness that we're careening towards in Midnight. Comparing the Silmarillion and Tolkien's works to World of Warcraft. Comparing H.P. Lovecraft's works and all of that eldritch horror stuff to World of Warcraft as well. And it's not just between World of Warcraft and these works either. You see this in all sorts of movies, in all sorts of media, where one thing inspires another, or they're just leaning on the same classical storytelling archetypes or tropes, and as a result, you can take what you might know about one section, right, one ring, as it were, and use that to more deeply understand the next, or to even predict how the story ends or where it goes. This is just the inherent connectivity between different forms of media. That's part of why they say there's no original stories anymore, because they're all effectively retellings of the same ones over and over and over. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's this, this beautiful pattern, and some would say that even life itself adheres to this pattern. Spherical objects floating in space around other spherical objects in elliptic patterns, and here we are. There's cosmos is full of spheres. I wonder, why that is. So some would take that to a philosophical level and relate that to fractals and whatnot. But the real point that I'm trying to make is that the narratives at a high level and a low level, and even from different media sources, have similarities, and I don't think that it's necessarily an accident. Is it always completely intentional? Probably not. There are going to be things that align, even if the original, the author of this most recent or original work, if you will, did not intend for it to be the case, but it's still going to be there. So yeah, you'll be able to recognize many different fantasy connections and tropes and underlying themes that connect much of this stuff together. So hopefully this has brought a greater understanding to you in terms of what fractals are, how they're used in storytelling, and how they exist in World of Warcraft, because ultimately, again, as confirmed by Dave Kosak and as written by Metzen over 10 years ago now at this point, World of Warcraft is cycles within cycles, circles within circles, that some of which are nearing their completion, and some cycles which have been broken. And that was a big theme of BFA as well. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like I said, leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for all the support recently. Make sure you leave a comment down below with your thoughts, and keep your eyes open. Consider looking at World of Warcraft, and frankly, I would consider looking at all media this way. I play other games and am able to predict and understand underlying themes and concepts much more quickly than other people, because I'm looking at the underlying pattern, the underlying structure, rather than laser focusing on the specific individual, trying to see the bigger picture. And so that's why I was able to catch on to Final Fantasy stuff more quickly and League of Legends stuff more quickly, and why I notice similarities in other media and games as I play through it more quickly is because I'm looking at it in this manner and recognizing the underlying motivation. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you very much. Stay awesome, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Peace!